Well, it is the top of the hour. We're joined by a very global audience, so I'm not going to say good morning or good afternoon. I'm going to say good day to wherever you are in the world. My name is Preston Clark. I'm the president and co-founder of Law Insider. Many of you know me, many of you do not. I have been working and building Law Insider for over 10 years. I was an in-house attorney much earlier in my career, but have spent the majority of my professional career in software, in subscription legal tech services, and Law Insider has sort of miraculously turned into a very large business, and one with a very large reach, which is relevant to Electra and the news today. The goal of this webinar, and I want to be very direct on this, is that we're going to welcome the oneNDA community. Many of you know Electra, have adopted oneNDA, and so we're going to speak very directly to you. Electra is going to tell you where we're going. She's going to make sure that you know that oneNDA is, it is not changing, or it is not evolving in a way that is taking anything away. If anything, it's expanding. And so we'll talk directly to that. We're also going to speak to the Law Insider community that is not familiar with Electra and is not familiar with oneNDA. The underpinning of this webinar is contract standardization. So it's not just about oneNDA, it's not just about Law Insider, it's about our commitment, our new commitment to standardization, much further beyond the non-disclosure agreement. And maybe the biggest goal of all is that we want your involvement. I know that not every one of you, there's now 135 of you here. I know that not every one of you cares about standardization, or maybe you do care about it, but not to the degree that you want to be involved in its development. But what Electra is going to paint for you today, the vision that she's going to paint, is very much about turning, or the starting point of oneNDA, which is a globally adopted non-disclosure agreement standard, and to turn it into something that is much larger, a vision for 50, 100, 200 global contract standards that are adopted by millions of organizations worldwide. That is our ambition. That is our goal. That is why we're here. But to achieve that, we need lots of buy-in, and we need lots of participation in the development of these standards. And so our hope is that we identify a handful of folks today. So we're going to tell you the story. We're going to tell you where we're heading. But our hope is that by the end of this webinar, a handful of you, maybe 5 of you, maybe 50 of you, will be inspired to raise your hand and say that you would like to participate. And Electra is going to tell you what participation means in very specific terms. So I'm not asking you to raise your hand yet, although I hope some of you are excited at the prospect of doing so. But this is about a movement towards contract standardization. We expect that this is going to be very interesting to in-house attorneys globally. We expect that it may also be interesting to big law, to small law, to solos, anyone that is trying to accelerate routine contracts, that have found themselves negotiating agreements over and over again that look very, very similar in ways that do not really exercise the muscle that we developed in law school, but that feel very mundane and rot in all sorts of ways that are non-strategic. So our goal here is to find our people, to find our community. And Electra has done a wonderful job doing that with oneNDA. It has an absolutely incredible following. We estimate that the oneNDA global standard is signed over 7 million times a year. So this is major scale. And now we're going to go expand that much, much further beyond the non-disclosure agreement. Blocking and tackling, before we jump in, and excuse the American-centric analogy there, of blocking and tackling. The webinar is recorded. We are going to send the recording out. We are going to give you an opportunity to raise your hand, to be a participant in the steering committee that will shape these new standards. Electra will tell you all about that. And this is just the beginning. And so if you get inspired today and you want to hear more, you want to learn more, there will be more than ample opportunity to do so. This is just the start. And we're really excited. I'm really excited. Electra and I have been working together for over 2 years now. It went by very quickly. and we've been working on the future of standardization and what standards means for technology, what it means for AI, what it means for playbooks, what it means for going well beyond just a single document or a single standard. And so we're going to unveil some of that vision today. Without further ado, Electra, would love for you to introduce yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend Electra Japona and our Chief Legal Officer here at Law Insider.
Thank you, Preston. Hi, everybody. I'm Electra. I'm the Chief Legal Officer of Law Insider, and I'm also the founder of oneNDA, which is an initiative that we started back in 2021. And I started that initiative having been a founder of another business called the Law Boutique, or TLB as it came to be known. And at TLB, what we did was we reviewed contracts for in-house counsel that had too many contracts to review. And basically, we found that at the end of the year of COVID, where that part of the business grew exponentially, we did a deep dive into all of the contracts that we'd looked at that year, and we found that 63% of the agreements we reviewed were NDAs, but that only accounted for 7% of our revenue, which is, of course, outrageous. And that should not be the way. The redundancy that these agreements were creating was enormous. And also, they obviously weren't serving anyone, including those that were reviewing them for a fee. So this wasn't working. And TLB was always, the vision behind TLB was always to streamline the way that in-house legal works. I've always been very passionate about that. And that's the reason that I wanted to leave my job as an in-house lawyer when I was one. It's because I wanted to do something to change the problems that I'd seen during my 10 years as an in-house lawyer. And so I decided to put a thought out on LinkedIn, and that thought basically became a reality. The thought went along the lines of, why are we all spending our time reviewing endless contracts that basically do the same thing but are expressed in different words? And that single post got phenomenal response. And then together, I put together a steering committee, and we came together to create oneNDA. And oneNDA is a crowdsourced, open source, non-disclosure agreement template, and it's available for everyone to adopt for free. And as Preston said earlier, we estimate that it gets signed around 7 million times a year now. And we have 4,000 adopters from organizations in every single industry you can imagine. We have some really big names there. We have EasyJet, we have Novartis, we have PwC. We've got some really big names who have adopted it, which just goes to show the reach that we've achieved here. But of course, oneNDA was not always about the NDA alone, and not always about just one type of agreement and the pain that causes. It was about creating a movement around how we can contract in a much more sensible way, in a much more efficient way that does away with all the redundancy that we currently see when it comes to contracting. And so when the opportunity arose to work with Preston and to complete this acquisition, I was over the moon, because finally oneNDA had a path to scale, because in order to do what we envisage, we are going to need the infrastructure, we're going to need the reach, we're going to need the bigger community, and we're going to need some really smart people to come together and deliver what we know that we're capable of. So it's a very exciting time.
Thanks for that, Electra. We want to talk about what's coming. I want you to tell us the standards that we're going to be developing, and how folks can get involved, what the methodology is. These are all really important points to touch on for those that are interested. I want to take a little bit, just a couple of minutes, to talk about the history of Law Insider. I'm not selling you on Law Insider. If anything, I'm doing the opposite. I'm just giving you context into the importance of the relationship and why this acquisition is so important to us. I started Law Insider over 10 years ago as an initiative to aggregate public contracts and clauses, because I, as an in-house attorney at the time, was ill-equipped or under-resourced to draft. I didn't have that expertise in law school. We learned lots of wonderful things in law school, and as we know, drafting contracts is not one of them. And so I saw this opportunity to develop a tool that would benefit myself and hopefully many hundreds, maybe thousands, and it turns out millions now of users. In the process, we developed an incredible community because every single day, in fact, 2 million times a year, a contract is downloaded from lawinsider.com. And over 20 million times a year, a clause is downloaded or copied from lawinsider.com. For the most part, this is for free. For the most part, and I want to speak to this very directly, what this means is that we're a publicly available contract database that you can come to, grab the contract you need, and leave. The commercialization, how we make money, is only relevant to the extent that you're like, wait a minute, how are we going to promote a standard if we're going to charge for it? And the reality is we're not. The goal of oneNDA is the same as the goal of Law Insider. Is how do we create commercial contract resources for attorneys to draft better, to draft faster, to draft more consistently, so we have 10,000 paying customers. It's a wonderful business, but we have millions and millions of free users. And so if you're a business person and you're looking at sort of conversion rate, we're a freemium business model that mostly the world knows us as a free tool. And that's how we want you to know us. We always have products and services available, but by and large, what we are doing is finding bodies of contracts and clauses and making them available so that the world has resources in a way that lots of in-house attorneys don't have access to, lots of big law doesn't even have access to. The problem with that is, from a business perspective, bear with me, you may find this interesting, you may not, is that I wouldn't call Law Insider a dirty secret, but I also wouldn't call it something that is celebrated, because as an attorney, if you are drafting and you come to Law Insider and you download a contract or you take a clause, you're not going to your client and saying, oh, I found this great clause at Law Insider, this is all going to work out just fine. You take it, you use it as your own, and you go on. And we didn't create the clause. We found it in the public domain. We resurfaced it to you. You found it. Now you're drafting. This is a very normal operation. But when you consider that 2 million downloads a year are occurring, and we don't have any moment in that, it's a missed opportunity. And so I'm being very pragmatic and very transparent about the business model. The benefit to us of having standards is that it's a brand that you celebrate as the author, because it's important to you. Now, why is it important to you? Electra will tell you about that, but I think it's obvious generally, because there are lots of negotiations, like NDA negotiations, where it's much better to represent to the counterparty that you are not the author of the document, because authorship, unfortunately, oftentimes assumes bias or imbalance in a process that, for something like a non-disclosure agreement or maybe an MSA or a DPA or on and on and on, or a EULA, is assumed to be drafted in a way that is one-sided. And that is how we start our negotiation process that elongates something that is often negotiated in the exact same way. We're nitpicking over terms and over the duration and things that ought to be managed in a much more streamlined way, and not in this very sort of legacy redlining way for a routine document. So for Law Insider, we see this amazing opportunity to partner with Electra, to partner with oneNDA, to launch a library of standard agreements that are used by large businesses and attorneys around the world, and in the process, getting some credit. And that may seem wonderfully selfish, but all business has some selfishness built into it if it's a for-profit. And ours is not to monetize the standard. Ours is to get the credit, because we've been at this for 10 plus years, not getting any credit, and the business is still really good. But the idea that we can push standards into the world, and that Law Insider can be known as a creator of community and a creator of peer-reviewed, of steering committee reviewed and approved standards that are adopted by Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 organizations and well beyond, that is an incredibly inspiring vision to us. And I think it's one that feels very altruistic, in the sense that we're not asking for anything in return. We're just asking to put our brand on something that does a lot of good for the legal community. So that's a little bit about Law Insider. That's a little bit about why we're here. Electra, I think that there's lots of folks on this webinar today that don't know a ton about oneNDA, and certainly about where we're headed from standards. So let me pass this back to you and let you take us from here.
Sure. Thank you for that context, Preston. And I have had that question a lot, so I'm glad that we've responded to it. So from a oneNDA perspective, the reason this makes so much sense is because creating oneNDA was just such a great pilot and such a great way to evidence that the appetite for standardization is there. And we learned a lot during that process. So I'll talk to you about the methodology around oneNDA and how we created it. And then I'll talk to you about how we can scale that now that we are part of Law Insider. So when we started off oneNDA, we basically reached out to the legal community who agreed that it was really sensible to standardize the non-disclosure agreement. But how are we going to do that? The first thing we needed was to understand what goes into an NDA currently, and not just from our experience, but from a broader experience perspective, because we needed a document that was balanced and fair, but also representative of a wide variety of different industries and also types of organizations and sizes. And so we reached out to the legal community and we asked them to send us their templates, not signed agreements, but templates. So this is kind of their ideal starting point. And then from there, we also collaborated with the World Commerce and Contracting, who gave us their own NDA that they drafted with the use of AI. And they had processed 2,000 NDAs to come up with a super NDA that incorporated all the provisions that were present in those 2,000 agreements. So it was a very manual process. And it also ended up being an NDA that was more representative of just the people that were interested in this kind of initiative. So we took this super NDA and then we created a steering committee, as I mentioned earlier. And that steering committee comprised of in-house lawyers from some large organizations and also in-house lawyers from smaller businesses, tech startups, scale-ups, but also law firms, because we needed the law firms to come in and give us their expertise, but also legitimize the initiative. And together, we took the agreement from the World CC and every other template that we had that was donated, and we broke it down into functions. And the idea there was that we wanted to abstract complexity, because when you're a lawyer, you're doing two things when you're reviewing a contract. In the first instance, you're assessing whether a certain provision should be in or out. You know, is it sensible to have a liability clause here or a penalties clause here? And then the second thing you do is that you look at the language and you assess whether you like the language. And so for the purposes of this exercise, we wanted to abstract complexity entirely. So we had to take all these NDAs and we had to take out the titles, and then we put them in a Kanban board, and we got the steering committee together to vote on what clauses should be in, what clauses should be out, and then from those, which of those should be variable and which of those should be boilerplate and therefore non-negotiable. And then after that, we worked with a drafting group, and this was a collection of law firms who very generously donated their time, and together those law firms went away and they drafted the language that would express the provisions that the broader steering committee agreed should be present in oneNDA. And this took a very long time, and it wasn't very scalable, but also we weren't leveraging volumes of data to create this standard. So what happened is that once the law firms came back with their proposed language and the steering committee voted on the best language to express the provisions, we issued version 0 of oneNDA. And then we got 28 pages of feedback from the broader community, which at this point comprised of around 1,000 lawyers. So we took all their feedback and we incorporated it back into the document, and then we issued version 1 of oneNDA. So this is a long process. It's also a process that requires a lot of input from a lot of people. And often that means that the samples that we're collecting aren't necessarily representative of as wide an audience as we'd like. Now we're part of Law Insider. So as Preston said earlier, there are 20 million clauses downloaded from Law Insider every year. There are currently 5 million different types of agreements on Law Insider. Preston, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's 5 million contracts currently on Law Insider.
That's right.
We now have access to incredible volumes of data at the tip of our fingertips. So we can. This morning, I had a call with our engineer, and he was instantly able to give me access to the number of a certain type of agreement that sits on the Law Insider library, what types of clauses make up those agreements. And now we're also going to be able to use AI to generate really balanced and fair language with it reviewing all the clauses within those agreements to create something that is representative of those provisions that already exist. So something that took us sort of 3 to 6 months to create will now take us days. And also it gives us access to so many different types of agreements that will be able to create more and more standards across the board, across various industries and verticals. So I'm so excited about this because it's really been a vision of mine since I started oneNDA. But to be able to scale a methodology that was so manual previously and to be able to do this at volume is just an incredible opportunity. And yeah, of course, the missing part is, or not the missing part, the key part that we need to leverage is the community, because we still need your expertise. We're going to create the first drafts, but we absolutely need your input in terms of selecting what needs to go in and what needs to go out, and also whether the language that we produce is conducive to wider adoption. So that's the plan.
To foreshadow one thing as well, and Electra touched on it briefly, there's a really strong, or there should be a really strong relationship between standards and technology. And this is another thing that Electra and I have talked about for a long time, and that through the Law Insider partnership and through the acquisition, we'll be able to enable. And I'm telling you this now because as you decide or not to join the steering committee to help us formulate and decide on these next agreements and what they're made up of, there's going to be an unlock, which I hope is very exciting. It's very exciting to me. It's very exciting to Electra, that will bring technology into and probably recalibrate or sort of adjust your definition of what a standard is. And I want to just tell you about 2 examples of that, and then hand this back to Electra. So there's a notion of versioning, or there's a notion of industry specific, or there's a notion of just that MSA can't work for me because, or venture capital or investment bankers saying this NDA can't work for me because. And in the spirit of standardization, it's very difficult to accommodate that without losing the singularity of a standard. Because part of what makes a standard familiar and adopted, and it can sort of something that has consensus behind it, is its uniformity, which still has to remain. There has to be some very clear guardrails on what's included and what's not, and how the language is posed, et cetera. But with technology, what we can do is we can give you a builder that allows you to configure your version of a standard. And that may result in some clauses going away, or some being added, or some industry specific aspect being modified. And so that really excites me, because there was when you're just existing within the 4 corners of a Microsoft Word document, what's possible is just less. And as a result of that, I think standards tend to be more rigid, or more painful to use at very least, because you're following a series of instructions trying to remember whether or not you need to include something or exclude something. So that's number one. And the second one, which I think is incredibly novel, which I am the most excited about, is the idea that once you have adopted a standard like oneNDA, because I'll use that as an example because it exists, that there is an AI-powered review tool that can then defend the principles of that standard when you are reviewing third-party versions of that document. So you send out the NDA, it moves faster, people accept it. Matthew is giving some examples of venture capital where it's negotiated less often because it's understood to be a standard. This is the spirit of what we're doing. This is the thesis. But we don't always have the leverage. We don't always can control our own standard. Electra and I are working on that, of course, but there's going to be 10%, 50%, whatever your business is, that will be third-party paper. And the idea that there's going to be a corresponding playbook for each standard that then you can use to negotiate. And of course, you're going to have your own parameters and your own fallbacks and things that will be very specific to your organization. But the idea that we can give you a Word add-in that reviews that document, flags the issues that are incompatible with the standard, is a vision for contract standards that just didn't exist, that couldn't exist 2 years ago, maybe even 6 months ago. And so I tell you this because as we are bringing you into this initiative, hopefully many of you, that you will be excited by this sort of added complexity or added sophistication, I should say, of what it means to bring a standard into the world. So I just wanted to add that additional layer because that's the part that honestly excites me the most about this partnership.
Yeah, and I think, Preston, just on that, I think we're evolving from a standard as a template document to a standard as a framework, because we need to. If we're going to bring standardization forward, we need to solve for the instances in which two parties can agree on a single standard, but also for the instances in which two parties do not. So if you're a oneNDA adopter and you send your oneNDA to the other side and they accept it, because they're an adopter, that's the ideal scenario. The second best scenario is that you send out oneNDA to the other side, they're not an adopter, but they've heard about it, or they read it and they think this is good, and they accept it. And actually, lots of oneNDA adopters have told us that that's the case, that they send it to the other side hasn't adopted it, but because they've heard about it, that's the leverage that oneNDA gives them. The other side is therefore reluctant to negotiate it because it looks a bit strange if it's a community created document that loads of people have adopted, and now you're pushing back for a kind of a run-of-the-mill scenario. So that's the second best. But the worst case scenario is that you send it over to the other side and the other side doesn't accept it and wants to negotiate it, or insists on their own paper, in which case oneNDA hasn't really equipped you with anything to allow you to overcome that problem. What we're going to be able to do now is deliver a standard as a framework, as I said earlier, which means that we're going to give you tools to deal with those instances as well. So as Preston mentioned, and this is going to get a bit nerdy maybe, but when we were doing oneNDA, we were talking about, as I said before, we abstracted complexity and we set out all the clauses that we found in that super NDA. And then the steering committee were going, this needs to go in, this needs to go out. And we were kind of documenting why things needed to go out just based on the discussions, but we didn't really delve into that point. And then after we delivered it, someone said, wouldn't it be great if we had a graveyard document that said that we're not flippantly just excluding these provisions. There is a reason why we don't think that this kind of provision that you might be used to seeing isn't in oneNDA, and that it's a thought through decision, and we need to give people confidence that that's the case, but we also need to give people ammunition. So when they send oneNDA to the other side and they say, oh, I'm really used to seeing this type of clause in, the adopter can send back the graveyard document and go, don't worry about it, the people that created it thought of it, and this is why it's not in there, and this should give you comfort. So that was the whole concept of a graveyard document. But then if you think about that in the context of leveraging AI, that graveyard document, if you couple the graveyard document with the explicit principles that oneNDA calls out, such as notices will be delivered by email, not by post. That's an explicit principle. And also the implicit principle of penalties are not appropriate for a run-of-the-mill NDA. Combined, you can create a set of core principles. And those core principles can then be turned into AI prompts that then power an AI playbook. So in the scenario where you've sent out oneNDA to the other side and they don't accept it, or your position, your power position is kind of weaker than the other side and they insist on their own paper, by adopting the oneNDA standard framework, you will now have the tools to deal with that third-party NDA. Because when you receive it, you'll very quickly be able to assess whether that NDA complies with the oneNDA principles, and therefore where the discrepancies lie, and you can just focus on those larger discrepancies versus the whole document and doing it manually.
Electra, there was 3 questions that came in sort of all at once, which was great, all literally the same minute. And I think that they're good ones. I'm going to take one of them because I'm just going to ask a question back. But if you want to take a look at those, please do. Lori, you said, I hope oneNDA, I adopted oneNDA in the hope that one out of every 10 that I sent it to would end up adopting it too. at the risk of, cross-examination, asking a question I don't know the answer to, what's the answer? How did it go? What did you get to 1 out of 10? I know that some of that is the strength of oneNDA, and some of it has to do with the particularities and the leverage of your own business, but would love to know the success story or failure story that you may have. So if you're willing to share some of that, Lori, please feel free. And then Electra, I'll hand these other two to you.
Great. So I'm looking at one that says from Patricia, the cover page that was released recently has helped me get others to accept it. That's great. I mean, that was exactly why. When we first released oneNDA, we had that cover page and lots of people said, can we get rid of the cover page because we're trying to automate it. So that cover page is not helpful. So we removed it from the second version and then everyone asked for it back. So we just created it as a separate cover page. So hopefully that's working well. I'm glad to hear that, Patricia. Leslie saying, curious as you say that about oneNDA, do you mention that in the initial exchange when sent over? Yes, so that's the purpose of the cover page. We wanted to explain what oneNDA is and use the moment of you're sending oneNDA to the other side as an opportunity to familiarize the other side with oneNDA and get them bought into the initiative, because it has managed to get lots of people excited and who have gone to the trouble of adopting it within their organization. And in larger organizations, as you can imagine, that can be quite a feat because you've got to get through lots of governance layers to change your NDA template. Yet lots of organizations have managed to do that because they really believe in what we're trying to do. So we have a cover page now, Leslie, that you can download and send to the other side. We also have a blurb that you can just copy into an email, and I'll take down your name and I'll send it to you afterwards. But yeah, we do provide you with ammunition so that you can influence others when you're sending it over.
I will add too that this is more tactical and less sort of big strategic vision, but you can expect a lot more adopter resources from us, both for
Yes.
oneNDA and the future standards. And so, there's going to be letters to send to the counterparty. There's going to be videos. There's going to be badges. There's going to be all sorts of tools that you can use, because that serves the benefit of the community and the benefit of the adopters, because you need to find very efficient ways to communicate what it means to leverage oneNDA. And so we're going to give you those tools coming soon. Chris Handy, who's joining us on who's listening in on this event, is going to be a big part of that. So that is coming very soon, we promise.
Yes, great. I mean, I'm happy to go into some of the questions here because they're really interesting questions, and I think it's a good in. So, Matthew, you're saying mutual NDAs are particularly well suited to harmonization. However, they are widely adopted because investors often disproportionate bargaining leverage. Yeah, okay, just on that. Mutual NDAs are well suited and other types of agreements are well suited. But when we get into the more complex agreement, I think we need to be mindful of the fact that a big portion of agreements is boilerplate language. And just going back to the World CC and a stat that's always stuck in my mind, about 90% of boilerplate language is semantically identical. I then did some research on Law Insider, and I was looking at, boilerplate clauses that you're used to seeing, like the governing law clause. And I found that a specific governing law clause was used in an identical fashion across 19,000 agreements. And then I had an entire agreement clause that was identical across 24,000 agreements. And it kind of occurred to me that this is exactly why the job of reviewing contracts is the perfect combination of stressful and boring at the same time, because you've seen all this language before and you kind of think you know what's in that provision, but because it's not a standard and you can't trust it, you've got to review it. And when you're reviewing a contract, you've got to be 100% vigilant, but you've seen it all before. So there's this tension that's going on in your mind, which is, I've seen it all before. I want to kick it back into my subconscious because I know what the severance clause should say, but you kind of can't. And this friction is actually costing businesses so much money, because you can't just trust it and move on. You have to review it. But if we can get to a position where we are standardizing the boilerplate, that's something that we can do across the board, and it applies to every single contract that's out there. Obviously not very nuanced, employment agreements are slightly different, but in terms of commercial agreements, the boilerplate language is more or less the same. And so, yes, totally agree with your comment, Matthew. And I think that we can expand that to agreements that are even more complicated than an NDA. So yes.
More good stuff coming in here. I
Do you
will
want
say
to?
I'm going to jump to one, and then you can find the one you want to respond to. But someone, JD, there are many standard agreement platforms. Most now claim AI drivers. Two questions: of the platforms, who do you consider your key competitors, and how are you different? What other standard documents do you plan to develop? Electra is going to tell you in a few minutes the ones that we're going to develop. We have 25 queued up, and I'm actually going to drop a link. If you are still interested, if we haven't lost you, which I hope most of you are still interested, there's going to be a place where you can just tell us the document that you want to influence, that you want to be a part of the steering committee for. Who are our competitors? Someone else, I think Zoe asked if it's free. It'll always be free. The standards will always be free. We can't create a standards community and then charge for it. Like, this will be free forever, I promise. Just like Law Insider has been free forever. So we don't really think in terms of competition or in terms of differentiation. We think in terms of network effects. You decide to adopt oneNDA, not just because you like how it is written. You adopt it because you know others have adopted it. That's what network effects are. We joined Facebook instead of MySpace because all of our friends were on Facebook, not because we like Facebook any better. Doesn't mean that the quality of the experience doesn't matter. Electra very thoughtfully is going to create a steering committee, and we're going to create great standards, just like oneNDA is a great standard. But if you look at bond terms or common paper or any of the NDA standards that are out there, and there are many, I'm not going to get in an argument with you about which is sort of substantively better. I will get into an argument with you about which is reaching its goal of network effects faster, because I think that's the one that ultimately wins. And we can debate whether that's right or wrong, but part of the bringing of Law Insider in here is that there's no larger public contract database. There's no more used contract database than ours. We get more users than Practical Law. We have more users than Edgar, right? And so we think that we are the best vehicle for network effects. And the job to be done then is to create the best possible standards that we can to sit on top of a distribution engine that can reach those network effects, so that when you are deciding to adopt oneNDA or oneMSA or oneDPA or whatever it is, it's with a degree of confidence that it's going to be a standard that will be spread across the globe. So that is that answer. Electra, I know there's a ton of other questions coming in that you may want to grab here.
Yeah, and just to say, after this webinar, we'll be sending out an email to you listing the 25 standards.
I'm sorry, Matthew, I saw your comment. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, yes, we're gonna be sending out an email with all of the standards that we're going to be pursuing over the next year. And we would love for you to be involved in the steering committee. So the steering committee is effectively the group of people that will be responsible for helping us choose which of the provisions that Law Insider has surfaced as common provisions in a certain type of agreement, which of those should be in, which of those should be out. And from those that are in, what we would like to then decide, which is going to be really fun, is which of those should be boilerplate and therefore not really negotiable, which of those should be optional, because some provisions are more complicated. And this wasn't really an issue with oneNDA, but as we get into more complex agreements, it will be. So an IP clause is a good example. You might have three flavors of that. You'll have an IP clause where the one side owns the IP, then another where the other side owns it, and then another where it's shared. said. And we don't want to dictate what that provision should look like. We want people to have optionality there. So we need to talk about which of the provisions should be optional, and then of course what the variables are. And these are the things like your name. So this is the exercise that we're doing. It will be a hackathon style. The people in the first steering committee said it was one of the most fun things that they did in their roles and beyond. So if you are interested in joining, I promise you it's fun, and we will be sending out emails after this asking you to express your interest in taking part in one of the one or more creations.
Yeah, and two things on that. There will be an email, a comprehensive one coming from Electra in the next few hours. I know many of you, it's sort of end of the day. So here it is. I'm putting it in chat right now. It is a link. Let's see, let me drop it here one more time. Hopefully, hopefully everyone can see this. That link both is your opportunity to apply for the steering committee, and there's no like cost or anything. We're not asking you to pay for anything. It's just we need to vet the candidates and the applicants as you would expect us to. But part of that is indicating which standards you are interested in supporting. And so if you have a minute to complete that, but this will also come out via email. And if you are really into this, we're hosting a conference in Miami called Future Contracts Miami at the University of Miami School of Law in February 10th and 11th. We have some free passes. So if you can get to Miami, we're going to be doing a live hackathon there with a few standards. And so if you're really into this idea, there's going to be a virtual version, which most people will participate in, but there will be an in-person version as well. And so as a part of the follow-up, Electra will send information on that. Oh, Dory just dropped the link to Future Contracts Miami. So you can read about that event, but this will be a big part of the agenda there. We'll be covering the standards exercise or the standards methodology.
Yes, I'm just going to pick a question here from Laurie, who says that I like the standardization of actual boilerplate, but also governing law affects the interpretation at times. Laurie, this is exactly why we need a steering committee, because we need to take account of the nuance here. And so when we did oneNDA, we had people from so many different jurisdictions that gave us input. So it's really important that we do this. But also now with Law Insider, what we're going to be able to do is localize the templates that we create. So oneNDA is being translated. It's being translated into 16 languages at the moment. So we've got some really generous adopters that have offered to do that for us. But going forward, we don't just want translations, we want localizations of different templates, which is why we need a diverse steering committee. So yes, totally take your point, and we're very mindful of the complexities of what we're trying to do and how ambitious our plans are. And then Gregory, I love what you're saying. Standardization can be achieved through a modular structure of the agreement where general terms are all standardized in one part. So totally agree. And it's worked. I used to do lots of legal design projects previously, and this is exactly the approach that we took. But this can be supercharged and amplified with the use of technology. Because one of the things that's been holding me back from doing more standards is my experience with oneDPA. And oneDPA is a really powerful document, but it takes a lot of manual editing to get it to where you need it to be. And if you're trying to streamline the way you work, you can't just take into consideration the standard language. You also need to take into consideration how you're going to deploy that standard to others, and how you're going to, when I say others, I mean your team first and foremost, because you're going to need to get them to use this thing. And sometimes they might think it's easier to just use what they're familiar with. So we need to make oneNDA and any standard that we build more plug and play, which is I totally hear you with the modularization, and that is exactly where we're going. So yeah, I'd love to see you on the steering committee so that you can share more insight on that. Cool.
We'll
Preston,
send
any other?
out, yeah, Dory will send out some passes for Miami. So if folks are interested, I know most of you that may not be feasible, but if you're interested, and I see Carl, Sky, others, we will send information on how to do that. You're not going to miss out on it. We promise.
Cool. And there's another question here. Which jurisdiction will Law Insider and oneNDA specialize in? So As I said earlier, we want to have lawyers from everywhere that take part. Obviously, we can't make a document that is specific to every jurisdiction, but as I said, we will localize as much as possible. But oneNDA is definitely suitable for most jurisdictions because it's been adopted in 46 different jurisdictions. So even though a document's not created for a specific country, it doesn't mean that it can't be used in a context of a commercial transaction.
Matthew, in this chat is great. We will send out surveys, but I don't want to miss this opportunity. So if you have all clicked on the link, you've seen the list, you've checked the boxes, you've hit submit, but you're like, gosh, we're missing 5 great standards, please share those. So in the chat, we'll capture them. There'll be a more formal process for doing this in the future, but I don't want to miss the energy of this moment. So if you have those ideas, please share.
Cool. Patricia's asking, will there be an application process to be a part of the committee? Yes, there will be. So if you click on that link, you'll be able to answer why you think a certain standard should be, a certain template should be standardized. And then we'll be reaching out to have chats with you to understand your experience and your motivation for wanting to go ahead with taking part in the steering committee. So yeah, we had an amazing bunch last standardization project, and I'm sure we'll get that again.
These are great. Software as a service, cloud service agreement. That's actually the one Electra is working on right now. So very good timing. Cheryl, is the steering committee only for attorneys? I think case by case basis. So Cheryl, I won't ask your background publicly. If you want to tell us what it is, you're welcome to, but please follow up. I think that there's plenty of people who live inside of contracts every single day and have lots of expertise in the banking industry, paralegals, contract managers, beyond. So we're open to it. Just we'll probably ask you a couple questions, but we'll do that for everybody. So yeah, very, very open.
Yeah, we had we had a couple of people from procurement on oneNDA because that was important to us. We had a couple of people that weren't lawyers but were founders. And so they wanted to kind of give their input in terms of how they were managing NDAs. So yeah, it's not just open to attorneys, but obviously experience with contracts is imperative. Well, you wouldn't be there if you didn't do that for a living anyway. Yeah, so Scott, if you look at the last template in the list that we shared, the link above, privacy policy is the last one. It's not a contract, but I mean, it should be standardized across the board with some optionality.
Thanks for the intro, Leslie. Thank you for loving Law Insider. That makes me very happy. And let us know. We know that the procurement use case is a huge one. And so I hope that the procurement folks on this call will raise your hand because we want your input in this process, because I think you more than many are dealing with the pains of unnecessarily complex agreements where you're seeing the same negotiations happen over and over. I'd also selfishly love to see some investment bankers, some private equity folks, commercial real estate. I think that there are industries where there's just massive amounts of paper moving, and they would rather it not. They would rather it move much faster than it does. So we want all walks of life on this, but those are a couple of areas that I think I'm curious about. Thanks everyone for, there's so many great agreement types here. This is great.
Yeah. And just amazing feedback from everyone. So Roxanne, there is a oneDPA that you can find on the website, which I will put here. If you go to this website, you can find the oneDPA agreement there. EULA, I've heard EULA a lot. So we attended Legal Geek earlier this month, and we opened up a vote for people to tell us what standard they want us to tackle next. And the SAS agreement is a clear winner. So it looks like this group.
Consensus.
Consensus has been reached.
Here's a question. I'm going to throw a curveball here. Electra and I met this morning talking about SAS. What do you want us to call it? Now, why do you care? Well, you care because if you're going to adopt it and you're going to share the document, it's going to have a badge. It's going to have the supporting documentation, um, and but the name will matter. And so, in the case of oneNDA, everyone knows what it is. It's very well branded. One SaaS doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well. We could just call it a cloud services agreement, a standard cloud services agreement. But the notion of branding as it relates to standards is something that that we're grappling with internally right now. And so if anyone has a preference or a vote or an idea, we would welcome that. We're bringing you right into the product team on this, right into product marketing. But it matters, right? Because you are going to be a part of the team that is pushing this out into the world. And obviously, some of the success of oneNDA is the simplicity of the name and how the name relates and very concisely communicates its thesis and its vision. One cloud. Okay, I like that. I like that, JD.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, any input on that would be valuable. Thanks for raising that, Preston.
um, so, okay, Karin, I appreciate that. I like it. Ooh, Lori, JD, you got +1 on one cloud.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good. I like it. I like it. Okay, yeah, keep the ideas coming. One legal. Uh, yeah. So listen, I've shared the link. Hopefully everyone saw it. Dory's going to be following up. Please keep the questions coming. I think a big goal for today was for Electra to walk through the methodology, so that you had some expectation of what was coming. And so just to recap some elements of that, we've arrived at the 25 I think we're going to pursue over the next 12 months. We have a lot of work to do to pursue that many standards. And so we're looking for a lot of steering committee members. We don't expect one member to traverse all 25. We're going to be looking for areas of expertise, of course. And so it means that we're managing a pretty, multiple projects all at once. And we're leveraging law insider data, as Electra mentioned, to get us to the V1, or at least the baseline set of clauses that will be included. Um, and uh, and then we'll go through these cycles of feedback review and debate. I know that maybe Electra has told me, and maybe you don't want to share it in this forum, but the reality is oneNDA was hotly debated, and when Electra talks about the graveyard, that was hotly debated because there's people who walked away from that process saying, I'm not bought in. But we have to arrive at a document that is sufficient. I think we're going to have a little more variance with these other standards than oneNDA did, Electra, and you can correct me on that. I think there was a rigidity to oneNDA that was a bit more exclusionary to some industries, and I think we can avoid that this go around. But I think it is going to be a pretty interesting process because there's going to be, as lawyers as we tend to be, uh, lots of strong opinions in the room about how things are worded, about what's included and why it's included. And so, we invite you into that, but we're going to forewarn you that there's going to be some difficult conversations. And I think that that's going to be part of the process. And go easy on me and go easy on Electra. Don't beat us up too much because it's hard to get to these final documents, and when we're talking about 25 of them over a 12-month period, that's going to be a lot of debating, which will be fun.
indeed.
Electra, what else?
Um, I love the names. I love OneSAS personally. I do like it. I know that it's maybe not not the slickest, but I do like OneSAS. So thank you everyone for your suggestions there. What else? In terms of next steps, as I said, we'll be sharing an email after this and you can pick your templates. You don't have to just pick one, you can pick a few, and then we'll be reaching out to figure out where the right place is. In terms of time commitment and what that means, we're going to be hosting a kickoff call, and then we're going to be hosting, the kickoff call will be only half an hour just for everyone to meet each other and just introductions. And then the next bit will be a hackathon. And this will be a 2-hour call where we sit and we agree together in smaller groups what needs to go in and out of the agreement. And then from there, as I said, we're going to leverage Law Insider's enormous library of language to create the language that's going to express the provision that you've agreed should go in. And we're going to use AI to do that. And then from there, we're going to be issuing it as version 0 to the broader public. And we're going to elicit feedback there. And then after that, you will help us with assessing that feedback and agreeing what needs to go in and out. And then after that, we will issue it as version 1. When we issue it as version 1, we'll also issue a load of collateral that goes alongside it that will help you socialize it within your organizations with a view to get it adopted as your organizational standard, but also socialize it within your network to get other people to become aware of what it is that we're doing and how they can adopt it too. So that's the process of becoming a steering committee member. That's the time commitment there. It's not loads of time. I think it's around 5 hours that we estimate. So if you would like to get involved, that would be amazing. Oh, Mariam, what a lovely comment. I didn't expect this webinar to be fun and interesting. Yay. Making legal webinars fun and interesting is, achievement unlocked.
And I'm going to say hi to Ellie. Ellie, thanks for joining us. I assume that you are in a very different time zone right now. So if it's the middle of the night, thanks for joining us. Scott Shepard, SOWs, I would just say generally industry standardization is something that we're going to filter through. As I mentioned, 30 minutes or so ago, Law Insider as a part of this is going to be launching a builder. And so instead of downloading a template, and this will be free, it's all free. You will build your standard. And so Electra will put a standard out. It will be published. It will be publicized who the adopters are, the steering committee. If you're on the steering committee, we're going to give you lots of public accolades. And then instead of, you can always take the document with you, but the document's going to be loaded with variation and instruction, whereas the builder, which again, free, I promise, it'll just ask you to input the parameters or variables that may be industry specific or other that will then generate a document that is just right for you. So that is, I think that is generally, now there may be a nuance to the question, Scott, about SOW. Let's talk about that. I mean, would love your input there because you may have some vision there that our technology can't capture, in which case we need more versions. But it's the builder concept that we intend to create that adaptation. Contract 1.
Contract 1.
Yeah, this is good.
Great.
Well, I think that is it for us. I will say it again. Please complete the form. Dory, if you're on, if you wouldn't mind sharing the link one more time. Let's share one more time. We're going to share the link to be a part of the steering committee. And then we're going to share a link for Future Contracts Miami. You don't have to attend that event. There's going to be more than enough virtual opportunities and hackathons. But if you want to, we can get you a ticket. Electra, anything you want to end on?
Just so excited to be here and to see all this energy in this chat and from this audience. It's amazing. And I'm so happy to, just have the chance to do it all over again, but with more. So thank you for being here and for listening and for getting involved. And I look forward to seeing many of you after this as well.
Thank you, Electra. Thanks, Dory, for posting. Thanks for all the questions. This is a community initiative. So we wanted this to be, we hoped that this would be a questions-driven event, and it was, and there will be lots more of those. The recording is going to come your way. Resources are coming your way. Links are coming your way. Give us a few hours to get everything together. Electra, I enjoy working with you so much. I'm so excited for this project. It's going to be a lot of work. And there's going to be some good days and some bad days, but I'm thrilled for it.
Yeah.
and open your inbox. Emails are going to be coming from Law Insider inviting you to do more things. So please join us on this journey, and we'll see you on the next event. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.